near-death experiences really fascinate me, and there's like thousands and thousands of cases, documented cases. So it's a real thing. It is a real thing.
Absolutely.
And so many people seem to, when they have this near-death experience and they have a little experience of being, across the veil or on the other side or that other version of themselves, their soulful self, um, it tends to awaken gifts like this. It tends to awaken the ability to see or feel energy. Um,
Yeah.
was that I mean, it sounds like that was the case for you. Was it something immediate or did it kind of happen over time? And how did that unfold for you?
Well, if we go back one step, actually, I was invited by TED to be a speaker recently in LA, and I spoke about death and rebirth and my near-death experience. And through trying to go back to science, because they're not so big on the esoteric space, was to look at research that's been done.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that over 10 million Americans alone have reported near death
Oh, I
experiences.
didn't know it was that
And
high. Wow.
yeah, it's really fascinating. And also, the pattern has been in, there's a brilliant professor in the Virginia University who just basically identified that through that came these heightened sense of awarenesses and just
Mhm.
things that they couldn't really explain. And anytime I meet someone who's also psychic and just has a can sort of play seventh dimensional chess, it's always like they've had. I remember this one psychic. She put her fingers when she was little in the plugs, and so she had an electric shock and was like. And so I think when you come close to the veil, it's like there's a portal. It's like there's something that opens, and it's just. I guess it's probably something you could close down if it's really bothersome, but um yeah, it's and for me it wasn't immediate. It took many years for it to come through, but a little bit like I had to go through my own death and rebirth. And if you look at astrology, the 29th year is also known as your Saturn return. And what that means is Saturn is where it was when you were born. And
Oh.
it's typically it's called a Saturn return, and it's typically times in your life that's associated with a lot of transition, but it can be quite painful and quite difficult. And for me, I had this fascinating year where it was 100% the hardest year I've ever had. But at the beginning of the year, I had a relationship end that was a codependent relationship. It was just shattering, like it was deeply dishonoring the way that he ended the relationship. And but for me, it was such an amazing lesson of like I allowed myself to be in a financially codependent relationship and all the vulnerability that went with that. But because I was so kind of broken that I really just meditated through the pain for the next 6 months so much. And so it was like I always say when I'm working with clients, it's like is your mind like a runway? Our minds are like a runway. So is your mind like Heathrow, which is one of the biggest airports in the world, in the UK, where the biggest plane can land every 90 seconds and it doesn't shake? Or is your mind something like an African bush runway where the biggest plane can land and it would just be a shit show? And so then six months later, just as I was getting back on my feet, I then was involved in this like really just awful accident. And it was like life had given me 6 months of training just to be really stable and really still and really calm. And I just remember it so clearly, and I was so calm, and I was just so clear of like this is going to be okay. Like I'm not going to be a victim. This is not going to be my narrative. This is not going to be my identity. And I had just I just really had done the work so that it didn't make me shake. But I just physiologically had a lot of injuries, which actually took me years to understand. But that was the journey. And I also wouldn't change anything for all the pain, for all the everything that I went through. It's been such a gift, and I have so much gratitude for the whole experience because it's
Mhm.
brought me to a place where I am able to help people, and it just brings me so much joy, and I find it so deeply nourishing at a soul level.
I get that because also, my own journey with pain, I wouldn't be here right now. If you didn't have
Of
your journey,
course.
you and I wouldn't be here right now having this conversation. And so
True.
I find it so helpful to accept that everything's happening for us, for our
Yeah.
growth, for our awakening, and for us to hopefully, also shift things in the world a little bit because we're talking about this, we're sharing it with people,
Yeah.
and maybe they can see themselves in this. Because when we have sort of regrets, or we're disappointed about what's happened to us in our life, it just keeps us in that lower vibration,
Yeah.
and just kind of changes everything. But I want to come back to, you mentioned the mantras that
Yes.
you were cycling 20 hours a week and reciting these mantras. And
Hmm.
I've done yoga for years and known about mantras for years, but they actually, the words, and I don't know if you had like a particular one that was given to you, but there's something about them that they have an energy about them.
Yeah.
Even the words, if it's, it could be English words, it could be Sanskrit, it could be anything, but the vibration of the words changes things in our energetic field. And of course,
Of
people
course.
that are watching and listening, you might hear us talking about energy and it might sound kind of woo woo, but I want to come back to the quantum physics. It tells us that everything is energy. So we are energy. We're 99.99999% energy. And
Yeah.
so what's going on energetically, which is just a vibration, it affects and it comes down and it has an impact in this physical body that we're in, and
Yeah.
more, right? In our life, in all kinds of our relationships, our finances, everything. So can you talk a little bit about that? About, was it the same mantra you spoke all the time? And do you think it was a vibrational thing, or was it like a reprogramming the brain thing, or a little bit of both?
The mantra that I used was the Hare Krishna mantra, which I can share so it can go in the show notes. But it's I was listening to it this morning actually, but it's yeah, it just, I guess my experience, my meditation teacher explained illnesses to me in such a fascinating way, sort of energetically. He said, look, illnesses have their own vibration
Hmm.
and we have our own vibration. And so it's about getting yourself higher than the illness you are. So, for example, and that's how when meditation comes in, or mantras, or things that change your state and change your frequency. So, for example, the common cold is not a sophisticated disease. But on retreats in the winter in the UK, there would be about 15% of the group that would have a cold. And we'd be meditating for about 8 hours a day whilst doing a Vipassana, which is an 8-day, very held retreat. And then by about day 2, day 3, everyone's cold has gone because we've got our frequency, and the collective energy is obviously so much more like your energy plus my energy is more like 10. It's not 1 plus 1 equals 2.
Right.
And so obviously, when you look at more sophisticated diseases like HIV, then it's a different game, and that's the other end of the scale. But with mantras in terms of like the heart resonance, and yeah, and so fundamentally any mantra will be able to change your state, and you just become, it's almost like a conductor for just creating and changing the field that's around you. I don't know if that helps, but I remember actually having a really interesting conversation with Zach, because when so much was coming through and I don't always understand what I see and what I'm guided to do, but I can always ask for help from my guides. But he was saying, and obviously he weaves on both sides of the field in terms of Western medicine and then more in the esoteric space. But he helped me to sort of understand in terms of, like, of course, how the reason that energy medicine, energy work can be so impactful, which is rather like what you touched on before, which is we're mainly made up of space and matter and energy. So rather than Western medicine, which will work from the skin, you're starting, if you work energetic, you're starting from the 99.999. So it's like way more likely of how it can really help people, which is why I think I have like what I often say is like my results are pretty immediate. It's like either I can't help at all or it's like immediate. And it's like if someone comes and says I've got a broken leg, it's like that's not my sweet spot. But everything else around that, unless it's like a massive structural thing, like a big broken bone, there's energetic stuff around that that you can also help. And I also often say with clients who are going through operations, which is when someone cuts you, like our 3D body, with a piece of metal, like you're actually cutting through the different energetic layers in the body, and it's a really actually quite a big thing to do. So I always really love working with clients like beforehand just to coach them mentally to get them into a good place for the operation of like seeing it in a positive way, because it's been so proven again and again of how if you go into an operation like thinking that it will change your life, it's going to be better, it's going to be great, rather like, you know, when you get a colostomy bag, but seeing that as like it will give you new freedom, lease of life, versus like, oh my God, the
Mm.
shame, the embarrassment. And that's just been proven that the results are better. So I was working with a client recently who's going through scoliosis, and she was really scared about the operation because it was pretty huge in her on her spine. But yeah, just it was fascinating for me because I'm learning all the time. But she actually asked me to work on her body whilst the surgeons were working on her,
Oh.
and actually I was able to just watch them like from above and just watch the operation going on, and then working with her different vertebrae in her spine. And it's everything is always new because it's just unique to that person's journey, but for me it was, yeah, it was fascinating.
Mm. It's so true. You know, your expectations of anything and your beliefs about anything impact your experience of those things always.
Of
I talk about that
course.
with people. You know, some people, most people who come to me have chronic pain or other chronic conditions, and sometimes they're on
Mm-hmm.
medications and they're like, I just want to get off this. Like, okay, let's just see it for now as a support that for you that you know, so many people in the world would be so grateful to have the opportunity to have this, and so let's see it as a support and something that's helping you. I mean, that I do believe that that's going to change the experience of it.